Okay, hey everybody, I'm Derek Mazzoni. Welcome to Sama, Seattle Sacred Music and Art. We are live streaming weekly. In my home, obviously, because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Also, this is my new stand-up desk. I've evolved. I'm pretty jazzed about that. So, new camera setup, new lighting. I think I like it. I'm still thinking about how it's going to work, but well, we'll see how it goes. I hope you're surviving and doing as well as possible during these times. It is the holiday season, as here. Other places maybe not so, but it is the holiday season here. So I wanted to do something on Christmas Eve, and this is an ensemble that I've been a fan of for a while. If you are into classical music, religious music, traditional music in Western and Eastern traditional music and classical music in the Pacific Northwest, you probably know them. They are Cappella Romano. It's a professional vocal ensemble that performs early and contemporary sacred classical music in the Christian traditions of East and West. The ensemble is known especially for its presentations and recordings of medieval Byzantine chant, the Eastern sibling of Gregorian chant, Greek and Russian Orthodox choral works, and other sacred music that express the historic traditions of a unified Christian inheritance. Their ideal for the broader intention of Sama to create an opportunity for people to have their hearts opened, to have their souls enlivened, especially as a balm going through the times that we're in right now. We have two guests from this ensemble. We have Alexander Lingus, Dr. Alexander Lingus. He's the musical director and founder of Capella Romana. He's live right now from Oxfordshire in England, and also Benedict Sheehan. He's the director of music at Saint Tikhon Seminary and Monastery in Pennsylvania. He is the artistic director of the professional vocal ensemble, the Saint Tikhon Choir, and CEO and co-founder of the Artifact Institute, a collective of culture creators. I like that, how that works. Welcome, Benedict. Welcome, Alexander. Welcome to Sama.
It's great to be
Lovely
here.
to be here.
How are you guys doing? How are you surviving?
Well, as well as possible, I think, given the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances. Here in the UK, we've just had new restrictions of various sorts, so it's put a bit of a damper on the Christmas plans. But otherwise, things are going to go just fine, I think, for us, I hope, God willing.
God willing. How about you, Benedict?
I honestly can't complain. I mean, I live and work at a monastery and seminary, and we life kind of has to continue here in the midst of everything. So I still have a job, which is great,
This
and
is true.
and I still have plenty to do, and yeah, so thank God, I'm
Perfect.
doing fine.
It's intriguing to me because I was thinking of this in the context of the art form that you work with, and that is the voice. And this is such an interesting and almost like what's the word for it? Almost like cosmic, where the tool that you are using, voice, is the thing that people are most scared of. And everybody's covered with a mask, and you can't play together. It's like it's one thing if you're far apart, if you're just like running a bow across strings, or even playing percussion. But your voice, the thing that gives you that is the art form which reaches you, creates an opportunity for you to express yourself and to reach an audience with that, is the thing that you can't use right now. How does that feel?
Wow. Uh, I guess I can start with that. I can start with that also as speaking as one who's always had a hard time trying to use his own voice, as your audience can probably tell already. I speak with a stutter. It's something that's been with me all my life, and I usually explain to people that I do it deliberately to get attention, um, which is a joke, but it also it's I don't know. It's some days it does feel like that, but yeah. So I think it's So I just wanted to point out that it's not your imagination. So to answer what you asked, I thought a lot about that. I think it's really interesting, like, 'cause the ability to communicate by speech is so fundamental to humanity is, and it's actually been speculated that we as we evolved, that we actually sang before we before we spoke. We actually made musical sounds before these things were formed into words. Um, and so singing is so fun. I believe is really part of what it means to be a human. It's part of our humanity in a really deep way, which I think therefore means it's something, anything fundamental. It's a powerful thing, and anything that's powerful is also very is also very it's also very dangerous. Um, so I think that's true on a metaphysical level, but we're also seeing now that it's true just on a basic medical level at the same time. So to me, it seems like in some way it's no surprise that the most dangerous thing we can do right now is to sing together, because I think that's always been in some way the most powerful thing we can do to get together.
Thank you. What about you, Alexander?
Well, it's been a mixed experience. Certainly, the thing I miss the most is making vocal music together with my colleagues, with my students at City University of London, and those are the things that I haven't been able to do. I have had some other sorts of blessings here and there when the churches were shut here in the UK. I went through the whole Lenten cycle of services in lockdown here with my teenage daughter, who is a wonderful singer, and so we chanted sometimes full Byzantine offices. So we went through Holy Week that way. And then since then, once we've been sort of in and out of lockdown, it's well, last Sunday I was in Oxford chanting Byzantine chant for 2 hours through a mask. So with the doors open to a very cold English winter. So I've had sort of all ends of the spectrum, except for singing together, which my friends and colleagues, though in Portland, from whom I've been separated because I can't cross the Atlantic right now, they did get together though very recently and did a Christmas broadcast. They all had the testing and so on. So and I understand from them that it was a very emotional experience to
Oh
be
yeah.
able finally to be together again and doing what they do. And I look forward to joining them.
Oh yeah, this has been the story from everybody. It's like you don't know what you have until you lost it.
That's true.
Obviously, and all of those stories are here. Let's start with the first piece. This is Saint Tikhon's. Who is Saint Tikhon?
He was, well, there's actually two of them, at least maybe three, I think. The one that our choir is named for was a bishop of Moscow. In fact, the last patriarch of Moscow, or, well, too complicated for now, but he was the patriarch of Moscow just around the time of the Bolshevik Revolution, and he was and he was elected as the patriarch like literally months before the revolution. But before that, he spent time in the United States, and among other things, he was the he was the founder of Saint Tikhon's monastery, which he he did in 1905. That's the oldest Orthodox monastery in the country. He did not actually name it after himself. He named it after a Saint Tikhon from Russia, who was about 200 years before him. So that's who the monastery is named for. But we named the choir for Saint Tikhon of Moscow, who died in 1923.
Okay, perfect. So let's start with this first piece, and then you can tell us a little bit more about it. This is the cherubic hymn from Saint Tikhon's choir. That's beautiful. Saint Tikhon's choir, the cherubic hymn. What is that? Uh, it's stirring and so needed right now. But tell me, what is the piece? What is cherubic hymn exactly?
Uh, yeah, well, that's the ninth movement from my liturgy that I composed. I finished in 2018, um, and the cherubic hymn is the music that accompanies the bringing of the bread and the wine to be consecrated from the table of preparation to the altar, where it will be after which it will be consecrated and be the Eucharist. Um, so it's the music at that part is to accompany those final preparations, and then the movement of the clergy. Um, but I think probably Alexander can tell you a little bit more about how that came to be in the form it is right now.
Please,
I don't know if you
Alexander.
have anything to add, but yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's a very long story, but this is a hymn that goes back to late antiquity, somewhere around maybe the 6th century. It was introduced, and one of the things about it is that it's called the cherubic hymn because it speaks of in the voice of the congregation saying, "We are like the angels, we who in a mystery represent the cherubim." And so it actualizes for the people singing it, for the people hearing it, the whole notion that human worship is a kind of image or icon of the heavenly one. And it's not only something in theology books, but people make it real by actually singing it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, perfect. It's powerful. Let's go to the next piece, please. This is the communion hymn, and Benedict, can you speak to about this a little bit?
Well, so it's the I think it's the 15th movement from my liturgy, um, and it's composed for a double chorus and for a countertenor for a countertenor soloist. As far as I know, I'm the first person to write a countertenor solo into a piece of Orthodox liturgical music. I don't know why I'm the first. It seems like a thing that ought to have been done a long time ago, but
Somebody has to
uh,
be first. Why
I
not you?
guess somebody has to be first. I mean, I'm sure now I'm going to say this on the air, and somebody's going to say, no, there's this one other, but
Of course.
um, so yeah, so it's set for two. So I split the group into two choirs, and they sing a psalm and they sing a psalm refrain. It's the text of Psalm 148, translated by my dad, who died in 2010, and it's meant to go together with the communion of the communion of the clergy in the liturgy, but also the communion of the faithful. And in terms of the scope of my piece, it's the last kind of calm point before the sprint to the end, if you know what I mean. So it sums up everything.
Okay, perfect. Let's share that right now. Samas. That was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. That was very stirring, on especially on Christmas Eve, and the kind of Christmas Eve that we haven't had over 100 years since the last pandemic, the Spanish flu.
Yes,
I'm here
indeed.
with Alexander Lingas, founder, executive director of Capella Romana. I'm Benedict Sheehan, um, director of St. Tikhon's choir. Benedict, I have to ask you a question because it's obviously you have a stutter, and you're representing the stuttering
Yeah.
community here right now. Your choice of work, shall we say, is intriguing, um, um, because it's almost like a biblical tale. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work in this space where the voice is used to create a transcendent experience on such a level, and yet here you are, um, you know, working with certain. I don't want to say limitation, but challenges, and
Certainly,
yet
absolutely.
you're
Yeah.
creating this powerful work. How did you come to this path?
Wow. It's a very long story, I suppose. I mean, I think I would give two answers. One is that at some point I had to decide that being a stutterer couldn't be a thing that would stop me from doing what I wanted to do and saying what I wanted to say. I would certainly say that in terms of the way stuttering research has evolved over the last couple decades, it's moved quite a bit more towards, in a sense, trying to destigmatize it rather than trying to cure it, because it's not, medically speaking, it's not a disease. It's not pathology in the way other kind of speech impediments are. Um, so and a lot of what actually you see as the symptoms of stuttering are have to do with with the way that the way that stutter believes themselves to be perceived, the attempt to anticipate a block and trying to avoid it. I mean, all these things. It's very complicated. So at some point, I had to decide, and I had great speech therapy from the American Institute for Stuttering, which really helped me to say, like, basically, this is what I do. It's probably not going to change in a big way, and so just say what you want to say and do what you want to do, and be open about it. So that's part of it. I would say on the other end of it, it's interesting. I mean, like, so I don't stutter like a lot of stutterers. I don't stutter when I sing, and particularly when I sing with others. So that somehow, maybe it drew me into choral music in some way. But it's also, as a conductor and a composer, in a sense, I have a lot of things I want to say. I have a lot of, I want to articulate myself in a very specific way that I can't do when I talk. But I found an outlet in my gesture. I found an outlet in my work as a composer. So in some way, it's given me a sense of, like, I might not be able to talk the way I want to and say the things I want to say, but I can when I do these things. So maybe there's that too. I don't know. I think the one to ask about it would be my wife, who is a great observer of me. So, but that's probably the best I can come up with.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. It's just, as I was watching and listening to you, I was like, wow, that's a serious path that you're on. And thank you for sharing this on this
Of
Christmas
course.
Eve with
Yeah.
us here. Okay, Alexander, Capella Romana, how did this come about? It's been going on for quite a while, and tell me the story of how this ensemble came together.
Well, it was a group of friends who got together to give a benefit concert. I was singing at that time at the Greek Orthodox Cathedral in San Francisco, which was in temporary quarters because of the Loma Prieta earthquake. The previous building had been demolished, and they were just starting up fundraising efforts. And as a postgraduate student, I couldn't give them a pile of money, but I could get together my university friends and do a concert of music, and we did Orthodox music, ancient and modern, from medieval Byzantine chant to modern Greek American composers on the West Coast, with a few stops in places with people like John Tavener in between. And it went well, and then I ended up in Portland the next autumn, and I thought, well, what the heck? Let's maybe give a season. And then it just kind of developed from there. And then it's a wonderful assembly of people. Of course, one person who's with us now 25 years
Wow.
is our executive director, Mark Powell, who and some other members of the ensemble and supporters and so on. So it really has been a group effort all these years.
It has it. It's a wonderful group, and I want to give a shout out to Mark also, who helped put all this together. But let's start with the first piece right now. This is Psalms 1, first part. Can you tell us a little bit about this before we start?
Sure. So what we're going to listen to now is music from the ancient cathedral rite of Hagia Sophia. This is the still extant building in Istanbul,
Hmm.
Constantinople, and this is a particular form of evening prayer. We're going to listen to Psalm 140, so another psalm, but in the format of the ancient cathedral rite, which took a tradition that we read about, where the ancient church leaders, these people we call the church fathers, started having people sing psalms but with refrains as a method for having them participate, because there were no hymnals, the literacy was rates were low, and no printing press yet. So what you will hear is the members of the choir sing the verses to the psalm, which is the part that changes more, and then everyone comes together to sing the refrain, which in this case is, "It is only you, Lord and Master, that we send up our evening hymn. Have mercy on us."
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Okay, let's hear it. Thank you. That was beautiful on this Christmas Eve. Really, really appreciate that. Um, this particular piece, did this was it commission, or was it like you just had an idea that you wanted to do this? Because it feels like, this is pre-printing press, so these were from memory. And so how do you know what they sounded like in that kind of space? How did you how did the whole
Ah,
project come about?
well, all many layers of this. So this came out of the Icons of Sound project at Stanford University. The co-directors there are Professors Bisera Pencheva and Jonathan Abel. And so it was a kind of a confluence of different approaches to this great tradition of Hagia Sophia, which spawned a fantastic musical tradition. They had um, singers, hundreds of singers on staff in its heyday. Again, the building itself was one of the most impressive ever constructed, certainly in the world up until that point, and for 1,000 years beyond it. And this was as a result of, on the one hand, Professor Pencheva being interested in the whole mystical experience of worship, in the how the sound interacted. She's an art historian, with also with the building, with the light, with the
Hmm.
sound, all these things together. Jonathan Abel is part of the Center for Computer Music Research and Acoustics, and he is interested also in how to in the sound itself in those buildings, and how one is able to measure it and then replicate it in real time. And then finally, I've been working since I was a postgraduate student. While I was founding Capella Romana, I was working on a doctoral thesis on the rite of Hagia Sophia. So, but something that, and there were elements on that very first Capella concert from that tradition. So I've been studying those manuscripts, and there is a notation. That Byzantine chant, the chant of the sort of Greek part of the Eastern Roman Empire, has a tradition of notated chant that goes as far back as does that of Gregorian chant. And so we have roughly 1,000 years of manuscripts, and the services for the Rite of Hagia Sophia, they survive in a small number of manuscripts, but they are there, and they can be, in many cases, it's enough to put together services.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's go on with this story. Let's hear another. This is the second um, part of the concert. Let's see it. Capella Romana on Sama Sales Shaken Music and Art special Christmas Eve performance. The resonance in that room is pretty amazing. It
Just
just
amazing.
goes on and on and on. Um, when I was planning this show, I wanted to go a little deeper into your history, which we're getting a bit. You know, these are interesting paths that you guys are on as far as artists and as scholars. Um, the thing that intrigues me about this music, though, is that it's a living music. You're presenting a window into a past, you know, going really deep. But this music, the Orthodox traditions, these particular artistic and choral work are vibrant and alive. They're being made right now. There are new pieces that are being made right now. But they're also intriguing because in the States, in the Western world, that history of this type of sacred work is it's not lost per se, but it's there's a lot of distraction, and you know you're presenting work that's thousands of years old that is still living right now. There are Orthodox communities all over the Middle East. Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion. We talked about that before, but it is this space where this is ancient, but it's still present right now. It's not like you're going in and these things aren't alive. They are alive. There are people that follow these paths. There are artists that create this work and continues with that. And so it becomes interesting because there's like a political component to that, a cultural component to it, but you're dealing with something as as a living art form. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think it's lost in a lot of people. When I was telling them that I was working on this, it was like, oh, so it's like a historical piece. It's like, yes, but not exactly, because this thing is evolving. Can you speak to that?
God, Benedict, do you want?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. I think it's interesting that you've kind of put these two things together. You put the Agia Sophia and then and then my liturgy, because in some way, in terms of the musical tradition of Orthodoxy, what you've got on the Agia Sophia recording is probably about as old as we can get in terms of notated or decipherable church music in the Orthodox Church. I mean, I could be, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but I don't like, you can't go much farther back than they did. But then with my piece, it's almost about as new as you can get. It's a piece I put the last. I put the last I put the last Fermata and double bar line on 2 years ago. And you know, I did a few more edits before we recorded it in 2019. And so what you're seeing in this is like the sense of the whole the kind of the whole scope of it. I like that you refer to it as a living tradition, because that's a thing that's really, that kind of inspires me and motivates me. I'm part of the Orthodox church, but you know, which as you say, you know, it begins in the middle, in the Middle East, and then spreads all over the world to some extent. But I have no ethnic roots in the Orthodox Church. My parents are converts, so I grew up in the Orthodox church, but in, you know, it's not part of my ethnic background. So I come to the art of the church as an American, as a modernized Westerner, and so I come to it as a composer with all these different, all with a bunch of different sounds in my ear, and with certain, and importantly with the English language in my ear, which is a new thing in Orthodoxy. So I'm interested in how these sounds, these old sounds that are rooted in the tradition of the church, how they can still be alive and fresh and meaningful, and yet at the same time, and at the same time, kind of eternal and transcendent and timeless. Um, and I think, as a speaking as an artist, there's so much inorthodoxy to draw from and to connect to, where you can really make new sounds, but still be in connection to the past, and still be communicating with the past in some way, which is what I try to do as a composer. So it's really cool that we can see in these two recordings the kind of a whole sweep of it.
I completely agree, and it's fascinating because it's the intention behind Sama is to help people open up their hearts. A bomb. Keep going. I'm coming up with new words for this, but it's basically
Yeah,
times are tough. This music helps you through hard times. Throughout history,
yeah,
things haven't been great. And so this music is specifically to help you through that. It's like humanity. It's not it's not like we're hanging on a beach in Mexico. It's like, no, these are difficulties, and this helps. But it's as we're going through this particular historic time, the ability to tap the history and yet make of it something of it which is happening right now, which is, I think, really compelling. And so as I dug deeper with you in this space, I was like, there's something here that will, like the works that you're going to be doing, even now that you're working on in the future, are going to be referenced as, a pandemic or whatever you want to call it. But it's like, it's the ability to weave the story. I guess weaving is the best way to describe it. You're like, you've got this tapestry that you're continuing to make, and you know that it will continue past you. It's not like this is it, that's it, and we're going to recreate the same piece of music over and over again. This is
right.
evolving. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's that precisely that idea of historical depth that you mentioned, and following these threads, to follow your weaving metaphor as well, that all of these things interlock in so many ways, and that's something that we've tried through the years to explore with Capella Romana. Because on the one hand, this music that we were just singing, the tradition of Hagia Sophia, is a very particular urban tradition that actually died out um, uh, after these churches were taken over by the Fourth Crusade, in some cases, then by the Ottoman conquest. But on the other hand, that there are multiple living traditions of Byzantine singing. So I went and studied in Greece with a master teacher and learned formula by ear, and learned how also just to replicate those things completely, and many things far beyond what the notation shows. And actually, the core group of singers, I think one of the things that distinguishes our kind of approach even to these very early repertories is that we view it also through the prism of that living continuing tradition as well. So those things inform each other some way, so we're not just trying to kind of make up the notes somehow out of nowhere, but it's part of this very much this Eastern Mediterranean tapestry, where one sees the links between the vocal styles and traditions of ornamentation that are just part of the neighborhood, that are shared with Arabs and Turks, and then also going west with Italians and others in various ways. So yes, again, there are just so many links and layers, and that to follow all of them, it's more than any lifetime's work.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree, and especially now, and this is more of a broader political statement, now that we're so separate and alone away from each other because of the reality of the pandemic, yet at the same time we're connecting. Right now, this is magical that we're communicating and doing this program, not being in the same room together in real time. I'm These types of musical artistic expressions, knowing that they have a history, knowing that there is a component of transformation and change, and once you step away from the politics of it, knowing that we're all human beings, and knowing that we've been working on this art form and borrowing from each other. I think that's the magical thing about music and art, is that, like, you're going to work together. You're
yeah,
going to hear something. You're going to adopt it. It's not like, no, that's not. And how you that might be a great metaphor for the future that we're all hoping we will have. Where these petty differences kind of slip away, and the beauty of all of us as human beings striving for our children and our grandchildren and the world in general to be better. Um, this could be one of those times where this knowledge and this learning can help us and guide us in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Very much so. I think that sometimes it's modern ideologies, it's modern nationalism in many ways that has divided people musically in ways that they weren't before. Where,
Mm-hmm.
say, the Ottomans, you had Greeks and Jews and Armenians providing Ottoman court music as well as Muslims, and that people listened to each other and heard each other. And this is true at various other points in history as well. Some of that Capella has explored. Greeks under Italian rule, for example, or the Italians who came to work for Catherine the Great in St. Petersburg. I mean, there are all these moments of cultural contact, creating things that go far beyond any sort of simple, cheap appropriation, that these things are become indigenized and culturated and form a basis for further artistic creation.
Perfect, beautiful. We could talk for hours and hours, but let's make sure that this audience has some music also. The three of us are chatterboxes. I knew that was going to happen. So let's go to the third piece right now. Um, All right, Sama, Sacred Music and Art, Capella Romana. I'm here with Alexander Lingas, Benedict Sheehan. Alexander, tell me about that piece.
So that's a prologue of a much longer poem about the Holy Cross, and it speaks of the cross being lifted up. It's vaguely militaristic, but it's at the same time paradoxical because it speaks of having the help of the cross in battle and that it may be a weapon of peace. One of the interesting things about Byzantium is that it never really had the sort of just war theology that was developed in the Latin West in the Middle Ages, and that it was always a defensive war that was to be fought, and that even if soldiers, even if they might have been somehow prayed for, that if they killed people in battle, according to the church fathers, that they were still subject to penance because there's no free ride for killing people, even if you
Oh,
have to do it.
okay. Fascinating. Very different
Very different,
than the
yeah.
message that you get. Okay, let's go to the fourth piece right now. on Sama, Självsäker Music. Cappella Romana on Sama Sales Shaken Music and Art. Tell me about that piece.
So that was a responsorial psalm, what's called in Greek a prokeimenon. It's the equivalent of the gradual from the Roman Rite. And so there's a refrain which the soloist starts off and tells us, exalt the Lord our God, and then the whole group sings it as well. So it's this call and response, very ancient principle again, another permutation of it. And then we had our two soloists do verses in between the refrain. And one of them was a woman in this case. And the reason we used a woman is because we know at Hagia Sophia in before the 12th century, up to the 12th century rather, that they had soloists who were eunuchs, who were male sopranos. So something perhaps not too far off sonically from what we heard in Benedict's communion verse. And
which is also, by the way, that piece, my communion, my communion verse is, in a sense, a kind of a modern interpretation of the same thing you just heard. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off. But.
Yeah,
No,
no, that's exactly it. You're showing that continuity of tradition.
That's perfect. So, a bit of business. You guys are releasing records. More information. We'll have links to all of that, so people can actually hopefully download this music because streaming is difficult at this time. But from a historical perspective, before we finish with our fifth piece, this is how music was heard. This is the musical experience for many, to be heard first time, as far as in that space. Particularly, it's like we don't know exactly what was going on with the Egyptians. We don't know exactly what's going on with the Greeks and Romans, but we know that there's a record. This is how music was interpreted. This is how music was shared. This is how that transcended experience was first brought to humans in that environment, in these places. And yet, right now, here you guys are creating more work, creating new work, recreating this particular space, and releasing records, releasing DVDs, living in this space, and continuing to create in that environment. I'm curious how you kind of like where this is a question I always ask is like, how would you like to see this evolve? How would you like, if you had your dream in the next 5 years, what would you like to see happen with this music, with this performance, with these artists? What's your ideal in this space? Is it just to like, I want to wake up the next morning and continue to work, or is there a bigger, like, what's your what's if you had it all, what would you do with it?
Benedict?
I defer to you.
Oh gosh.
I mean, I
well,
love it, and I think it needs to be shared, and I would love, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help, and I want our audiences also. But it's like we're always as we're always expecting the worst, as human
Yeah.
beings. It's just getting ready. But if you had the best, what would it be in this space?
Well,
I think it would be Benedict.
I think I think that what Alex has done and what Capella Romana have done in the Hagia Sophia project is really exciting to me as a composer and as an artist. The idea of creating a space of virtually, well, it's not a virtual space, but it's a virtual acoustic. I think that's really interesting. I think one of the challenges of choral music is that it's so dependent on where you do it. We are as our artists so dependent on the acoustic space that we work in. And one of my big complaints as a choral conductor and as a choral composer is that in order, like basically like we in the ensemble, like if you're actually standing in the ensemble or standing in front of the ensemble, we actually have like the best experience of anyone, because because the sound is all around us. The sound is in us. Like our bodies are vibrating with this sound. And I find that the farther away you get, the more the experience is diminished. And I think that's why I actually personally think that's a lot of the reason why choral music remains in terms of music to consume as a passive listener, why it remains so small and niche. Whereas for the whole realm of popular music, we're just like this little tiny drop in the ocean. But I think part of why a lot of like what we think of as popular music, why it seems to communicate so much more broadly, is because they've created a way for a passive consumer of the music to actually experience that same degree of intensity of sound that we get in the ensemble or right in front of the ensemble. And I think what Cappella Romana has done in creating this amplified virtual virtual acoustic is they've opened up the possibility for the entire audience, for a very large audience, or for a person just on headphones, to actually tap into that same really kind of visceral experience that we get in the ensemble. And so if I had my dream, I'd like to see choral music expanding into that arena in a bigger way. We now have the technology to do that. But having said that, I think it's a thing you still have to be there to experience. It's not a thing you can experience on a screen. It's a thing that you can experience in a space. But what I think what Capella Romana has done is to give that experience, that deep kind of bodily experience of the sound being all around you, the sound being in you, to have that in a much more powerful way. So I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see us performing in bases with that kind of virtual that kind of a virtual acoustic, but to explore it perhaps with different genres of music, and maybe even experiences that are not only experiences of sound, but visual experiences with smell, experiences with light, experiences with the arrangement of the audience. So it's not just like we sit in a chair and you stand up there and you do your thing. Because I think that's for, speaking as somebody Orthodox, that's kind of what church is like. We don't just stand still in church. Everybody moves around. There's incense. There's people coming in and out. They move around and they venerate icons. They may stay for part of the time. They may stay the whole time. It's not like you would get like in a kind of what I think when an American might imagine to be a church experience. So I think that could expand into the realm of a performance.
I agree. I think it would be amazing, and I think this sounds good. On headphones, it really sounds good, and you kind of have that because you are, you're not feeling it in your body, obviously, unless you've got some crazy pack or something like that, which does exist. they do, like for sub bass and everything. But it does sound
Awesome.
really good, and with HD quality, it becomes like an interesting experience of what you can do with this. Whereas in the past, you would need to be there, you would need to take people to your space, and we want that again. But to your point, Alexander, when you were talking about different scientists looking at this from an electroacoustic perspective and recreating this kind of space, you have tools and technologies right now which can create that experience for people. So it warms my heart to hear that, because there's room there to really be able to share this music and this experience, this transcendent experience, to a much larger audience. Yes, it is a drop in a bucket of all popular music, but it's ancient and it has a thread. We keep going to the tapestry theme, and it continues. It continues to be woven, and once people share this, I remember my first choral experiences. It was like, this is incredibly powerful, and a lot of people haven't had that. And once they have it,
Yeah.
they won't forget it, and they'll
That,
look
that
for
was
more of
that
it.
was yeah. One of the things with this Hagia Sophia project is that we got to share little excerpts of it, thanks to our friends at Pop Up Magazine, where we traveled around and provided some live music examples for an explanation of the Hagia Sophia project that Sam Harnett did. And it was, and the reaction for people, just the change of gears from the other items in the show, and then all of a sudden that they're transported back to 12th century Constantinople, and it was very emotional. We had reports in the press just how transformative that was. But at the same time, one of the things that we've experienced as a touring ensemble is that when we sing in ancient Cistercian basilicas in Europe and other places, that there is we will interact with that building and tune to it in very particular ways that are just as sort of remarkable. So there's also a real localization that's important. And I think back to your original question, what I'd like to do is just have the means to share these traditions, which so many of them, some of them long forgotten, some of them just barely known outside of their homelands, with as many people as possible. So whether that means through more concerts, more recordings, or and publications, making this material, which, because we have our own scholars in house with Cappella Romana. So the music that you've just heard was newly edited by members of the ensemble, and it is published nowhere.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Perfect. I feel like this is just the beginning, and there's so much more to cover. But let's okay. So we'll finish with the last song, and then we're going to say goodbye, and then we're going to find out a little bit more about how can people find more about you. We're in the age of social media, so we can do that. But let's start with the last part right now. This is Capella Romana. This is the cherubic. This is the transformation. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that last. I love that last cadence there.
That's
That
wonderful.
was very bold.
It's bold after it's a 22-minute setting, the whole thing.
Yeah. Oh man.
Wow. I look forward to seeing this in a room where you guys are tuning that place and being able to share that. Happy holidays. It is a trying time. Merry Christmas. This is Christmas Eve. I hope you guys stay safe and continue to create, continue to grow. This is also the no. We have one more Sama session. We're gonna have our recap for the year. A couple of things, gentlemen. Ran out of my SD card. This conversation exceeded my SD card. You have forced my hand, and I need to get a larger SD card for my camera here. It's been all year, and this is the first one. We could cover a lot of stuff, but thank you for that motivation. I want to thank also Mark who helped put this together. I want to thank Dagmara, Venita, and April. I want to thank our promotional partner, Seattle Theater Group. We have a message from STG. Of course, obviously, all the rooms are and all the halls are shut down right now, so we're going to try to get people to motivate to support them. I want people to also support KEXP, an organization that I work for that helps champion music from all over the world. And also Capella Romana and all of the. This is the time for everybody out there to support the organizations and the institutions that they care about that bring them so much to their heart and their soul. So open up your pocketbooks, people. We need to, if we're going to get through this over the long term, we need to be able to support each other as much as possible, especially at these trying times. This is the temperance. This is what's the word I'm looking for in the blacksmith. This is when the iron gets tempered, and we strive for a much better future for all of us. Thank you so much for this. This has been awesome. Look forward to seeing you in real time, and we're gonna have. Let's talk about this other piece before I forget. We have something planned in March. Can you speak to that for a second, Alexander?
In March, we have the release of our recording of the music of Cassia, or Cassiani, a 9th century nun from Constantinople. Actually, some of her Christmas music and some of her music for Lent. And we'll be singing medieval chants, some of them that have not been sung for many hundreds of years.
Okay, perfect. Look forward to sharing that. Okay, be well, everybody. Happy holidays. I know it's a trying time. Be well. And this is Sama, Sales Check at Music and Art. Thanks for joining
You
us.
as well.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maura Ahern with Seattle Theater Group, the nonprofit that's known for operating the historic Paramount, Moore, and Neptune theaters. What many people don't know is that STG is also committed to arts education and community engagement, especially serving individuals who are typically underrepresented. We've been providing arts training and personal development for youth for over 20 years. We are passionate about access to the performing arts. Before the pandemic, we were incredibly fortunate to be presenting over 700 performances a year with international, national, and local artists. Now, our stages are dark, and our sector is in jeopardy. The performing arts community needs your support. We are depending on individuals like you to help us get through this difficult time. Please consider donating today at stgpresents.org. Thank you. We cannot wait to welcome you back to the theaters.